Welcome, everyone. This is Colleen McCarthy O'Toole from QSMA's Community Support Department. We're so glad to have you here for today's Wellness Webinar Series presentation. We also want to thank our presenting sponsor, Genentech, for generously supporting this series. Please note that all attendees will remain muted during this webinar. If you have any questions, you can submit them through the webinar using the chat box in your Zoom toolbar. Your toolbar also has the feature to raise your hand, which we encourage you to do during the question and answer portion of today's presentation. We would now like to welcome our presenter, Julia Feinberg, who you may already be familiar with from her presentation at the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference, which you can now find on QSMA's YouTube channel. Today, Julia will be presenting on effective communication for healthy relationships. Julia?
Hi, it's so good to see everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm really excited to be here. I have an SMA type 2, and I'm in my 4th year of a clinical psychology doctorate program. And a lot of my work has been around therapy and mental health support for people with disabilities. And I've been really lucky and honored that QSMA has allowed me to share some of the things that I've learned along the way with folks with SMA and those who have people with SMA in their life. So today we'll be talking about effective communications for healthy relationships. And this is just a little overview of where we'll be going. We'll be talking about communication styles. You've probably heard of that before, and it's really important to know what kind of communicator you are. We'll also talk about, why does communication matter? What are you trying to get out of some of the conversations that you have? And then we'll quickly go over 5 different communication strategies that you might want to try out or see if they fit for you. So here we have, in the literature, there's a ton of different theories about how many communication styles there are. I think that, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. This one, where there's 4, is probably the easiest to think about and the most kind of just applicable to everyday life. You probably heard of passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, and then we have assertive, which is the one that we should be talking about the most, but probably you haven't heard of as much as the others. So passive communication, it's pretty indirect. It really just denies what you want as the person who's asking for something. You actually apologize and I'm so sorry to be asking for this. I'm so sorry I have these feelings that I want this or I need this. You might defer to what other people are saying and their opinion instead of your own. And it minimizes your own experience and prioritizes others. So an example of this, when you go and talk to your doctor and you talk about treatment options, might be, sure, just whatever treatment you think is best, even if you do have some thoughts or opinions about it. Passive aggressive it's still indirect, and it doesn't as much deny your personal needs, but it denies that you have hard emotions, that you feel angry or that you feel upset or hurt. And you might accidentally just kind of express those emotions in ways that weren't intentional. Or if they were, it felt like when you look back on it in hindsight, like you were maybe out of control, like you knew it was the wrong thing to do, but you did it anyway. An example could be backhanded compliments. And you'll also say, oh, no, there's not a problem. It's just when you leave the dishes everywhere, it is what it is, something like that. And then you also pretend to cooperate, but it's not coming from a place of actually being genuine about it. So an example might be, sure, whatever treatment you want, doctor, if you think that's best, because clearly you're right, as long as it doesn't kill me, something like that. And then for aggressive, it's inappropriately honest. It's the opposite of passive. So you might really impose your opinion on others. You're not going to be open to having an actual communication about the issue. It's my way or the highway. You're not going to listen. You're going to berate, blame. And it's going to be really hard for you to tolerate listening to other people. And as this points out here, you only use you statements. So you never clean up the dishes. You, doctor, are presuming what I might want. How dare you do that? Which it's true. Some doctors do, but that might not be the case for all of them. And so what we really want to go towards is over here, assertive. So that's direct communication. That's asking for explicitly what you want. You're honest, but not in a way that might feel mean or aggressive. And you're going to advocate for yourself by making I statements like, I feel hurt when you don't clean up the dishes because it means that maybe you think that your time is more valuable than mine. And you also listen and you're not going to interrupt. You express your emotions and you are able to take them in from others and tolerate them. So an example from the ones of talking with your doctor is, I'd like to discuss with you what treatments might work for me because I'm not sure what I want yet. Can we have a conversation about it? I'd like to hear your thoughts. So those are the communication styles, and it's helpful to know what kind of communicator you are to see what the signs are. Am I leaning this way? And maybe this is how I'm coming off in conversations. And I want to overcorrect by maybe being a little bit more sharing my emotions and a little bit less aggressive. So you can use that to balance out. And when we go back to the beginning, we want to think about, why does communication matter? So what do people think? Yeah, I'd love, put in the chat, unmute yourself. Why do you think communication matters? Sorry, I'm gonna check the chat here, let's see. Okay. Any ideas? I know it's hard over Zoom. Okay, that's okay if not. Oh, I see one come in on the, and make sure you have your needs met or helping another efficiently. Yeah, exactly, Serena. Yeah, if you can't communicate what your needs are, it's really hard to get them met, right? Yes, to get across your needs and wants. Yeah, I think we have this idea. And we call this kind of mind reading. Like, you want someone to kind of read your mind and know exactly how you want the caregiver to take care of your child, or you want your partner to cook dinner this way because you're sad and they should know that's what you want to eat for dinner when you're sad. But they don't. It's impossible to mind read. And so because not everyone is inside our brain and has our own exact experience, we have to be able to communicate that effectively and say what our needs are, and then also in a way where they can hear it. And that both of those are where it can get a little tricky. And it's important because we can't communicate through our body language. Ew, I like that one. Yes, definitely. I think that's so true, right? A lot of the times, you could cross your arms or lean back, and these are things like, hey, don't talk to me right now, I'm angry. Or, open up your arms, lean in, nod your head, encouraging conversation. But if you can't do that, that's a really good point. These are really important ways that we have to supplement in certain ways. Yeah, and I loved all of these. Yep, you basically all, Serena, Della, Camilla, you could just do this communication for me. Sarah, yep, thank you. You had it all right. And so we have remembering why communication is important helps us prioritize what our goals are. And so there are 3 specific ones that I'm going to tie in with some of the communication skills that we'll go over today. And this is from Dr. Marsha Linehan, and she's amazing. She's created something called dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. It's a type of therapy that you can do with a psychologist, and a lot of it has to do with communication. So the first thing about what you might want out of a conversation is you want a specific result or thing that you want to change. Or you might want to really prioritize and maintain the relationship or improve it. And lastly, you might want to preserve your self-respect. So maybe it's really important that you don't get what you want and the relationship isn't as strong as it once was, but you feel good about yourself at the end of the day and you feel like you expressed yourself. So these are three of the ways that communication might matter when you're having conversations. And it's important to kind of think about which one you're targeting when you approach your conversation. So here's 5 communication strategies. The first one, which is for prioritizing goals, is called Dear Man. And I have a video. So I'm just going to end the slideshow. And then I'm going to share the video on YouTube. Okay. Oh, why? Sorry, there's no audio. Oh, I think it starts a little more.
Dear Man is an interpersonal skill set used when you'd like to ask someone for something in a way that will more likely get them to say yes. It's based on assertiveness training models and can be extremely effective depending on several factors. You may find as you listen that assertiveness like this doesn't fit with what you've learned from your family or your culture. That's okay. See if there's anything within this skill that could still work for you. The term Dear Man is a way to remember each skill: describe, express, assert, reinforce, stay mindful, appear confident, and negotiate. First, describe the current situation using just the facts. For example, you told me you would do the dishes last night, but this morning when I came downstairs, the dirty dishes were still there. This helps orient the person to exactly what you're reacting to. You might be tempted to say more like, "You're always annoying with this stuff." Don't do this. Keep your describe short, concise, and objective in order to grab the person's attention and avoid making them feel defensive. Next, express clearly how you feel or your opinion about the situation. Don't assume the person knows how you feel. For example, I felt disappointed when I saw the dishes weren't done. By sharing your personal reaction, you're helping the person understand why you're making the request. Next, assert your request by clearly asking for what you want. Don't assume the other person knows what you want. Be clear, concise, and specific. For example, "Can you please do the dishes now?" Or, "If you know you're not going to get to the dishes, can you tell me so that I can do them and we can have a clean sink in the morning?" Notice how each assert was a question. It's not enough to simply express, "I'd like you to do the dishes." It's also not effective to demand, "Do the dishes now." Asking an assertive question can be uncomfortable for people at first and may require a lot of practice. Finally, reinforce or reward the other person ahead of time by explaining what they could gain by giving you what you want. At a minimum, this can be expressing appreciation or gratitude, just by saying, "I'd really appreciate it." Or try being more specific to the situation. "Our living space would be cleaner, which would make me less stressed. I know I'm a lot easier to live with when I'm not so stressed." Now, the other person might interrupt you, argue with you, or try to change the subject. This is why it's important to use the skill of staying mindful of your goal in the situation. If needed, express your opinion or reassert your request again and again. It might feel silly, or you might be tempted to change up your script. Instead, just repeat in a calm voice, "Can you please do the dishes now?" Or, "I would still like you to do the dishes now." If the person responds with their own request, becomes mean, or tries to divert you, don't take the bait. Stay on topic and be mindful of your request. It also helps to appear confident with your voice and body posture. Convey that you know what you want and you're deserving of it too, while still respecting the other person. Don't whisper, stammer, or look down. Instead, speak up and stand tall. The skill is called appear confident, not be confident, for a reason. Fake it until you make it. Finally, negotiate if you need to. Be willing to give in order to get. This may involve reducing your request or offering another solution to the problem. For example, how about I unload the dishwasher first so you can empty the sink? Another way to negotiate is to turn the tables and ask the other person for solutions. What do you think we should do? I would like a clean sink in the morning, and you really seem to not want to do the dishes at night. How can we solve this problem? Dear man can also be used to say no to a request. Using the same steps, say no clearly. If someone asked you to hang out and you wanted to say no, a dear man response could look like this. Hey, I'm feeling pretty drained and tired. I can't hang out today. I'd be more fun on a different day when I have more energy. Can we hang out one day next week instead? Notice how describe wasn't necessary since the person already knew what you were reacting to. Notice how you asserted clearly, I can't hang out today, instead of saying something unclear like, I don't think I can today, or I'm not sure. Dear man is a skill that works best when practiced. Practice writing your dear man out ahead of time and rehearse in front of a mirror or another person. Describe, express, assert, reinforce, stay mindful, appear confident, and negotiate when necessary.
Okay. I'm going to share my PowerPoint again. Okay. So I know there are a lot of steps in that skill, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming at first, but when you start to practice it, it's actually extremely effective. And it helps because, like y'all said, it's how you really are clearly expressing your needs and how you want the person to change their behavior, their action, in a way that makes them not become defensive and is more collaborative. And by having all of these steps in this order, it will hopefully help you get the outcome that you want. Of course, people are always unpredictable and you'll never have a perfect solution for every situation, but this one is really effective. Something that I wanted to point out that the video said is that a lot of times we're not given the skills to communicate. We're not taught them in school. Our families taught us to communicate in ways that might have been helpful and maybe weren't. And so it can be difficult and feel uncomfortable to assert what your needs are or to express how you're feeling. And so it's helpful to really practice. And you can do that with a friend or a family member, someone, partner, someone that you feel comfortable with, so that when you're going into a conversation that feels more difficult and challenging, you have some practice and confidence about maybe what words you want to use or the tone or how it's actually going to feel when you do it. And then it'll become easier and easier over time. Okay. Sorry, I just saw something in the chat. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I will absolutely put that link in the chat. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. And if I don't at the end, please remind me then. So here's another skill also from Marsha Linehan. And this one's for prioritizing the relationship. And this one is called give. So gentle, interested, validate, easy manner. And so this isn't more a step-by-step, do this, 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 and this in terms of what you say or how you say it. But this one is more, what's the manner that you're going about it? What are some things that would make the other person that you're having a difficult conversation with feel comfortable, draw them in order to preserve the relationship or improve it? So for gentle, you're going to treat them with compassion and respect and truly try and empathize with what they're going through in how you feel. For interested, you gotta listen. And even if you aren't, you gotta pretend to be. Just hear them out so that they feel like you're invested. And then you want to validate what they're saying. I know that it's really hard to do the dishes after work when you're exhausted and you had a really long day. And it totally makes sense that you would want to come home and spend time with me and our kids. I get that. And so you really want to show that you understand and empathize. And then you want to have an easy manner. And so slow it down. And I know that someone said before it might be a little harder if you have SMA in terms of body language, but you can do that with your voice. You can do that with how quickly or how you express kind of the words that are coming out of your mouth. There are lots of ways to do that. And it can be kind of fun to practice too. It's like a little kind of like acting improv class. So that's the give skill. And that's for really if you want to work on relationships and you don't care necessarily as much about having the person make a change. And then for FAST, F-A-S-T, this is if your priority is, I just want to be heard. You know, this relationship has been rough. It's been hard. I don't care if they change their behavior or not. I care that I'm able to express myself and I've said what I have to say. And that way I feel good about myself at the end of it. And that's totally a goal I've had in many conversations. So you're going to want to start with being fair to others, but also yourself. Saying, you know, I know you're really tired when you don't do the dishes at the end of the day, but I'm tired too. And it creates more stress for me when I see them. So you want to share your experience as well. Don't apologize for how you feel. I know it's very easy, especially for a lot of people with disabilities, maybe a lot of women or femme people or a lot of other identities to apologize for the feelings, desires, wishes that we have. Don't do that. There's no need to apologize for things that you're asking for. And then stick to your values. You don't have to compromise. If compromising means that you're gonna lose out on self-respect, and self-respect is your #1 priority, don't do it. And say that. Say, this is what I care about. This is what's important to me, and compromising or doing what you want or not getting what I want is gonna go against my values. Express that in a very clear way, and then be truthful about it. You don't have to exaggerate. You don't have to act helpless. You don't have to lie about it. Just say what it is. And by kind of actually authentically, genuinely expressing what your experience is of it and what you're asking for, it has kind of, that adage of speaking your piece. So this is a very short one. It's called the broken record technique. And this little graphic, I loved it. I actually included it. So the broken record technique, it was mentioned in the Dear Man skill. And that's when you ask for something, if the person isn't listening or if they're just not budging, just say it over and over again. Like it had in the example, I need you to clean the dishes now. Can you clean the dishes now? I would really like you to clean the dishes now. This could happen with your doctor too, or if you're not, that experience where you're in the hospital and you need to see the doctor and they just keep saying he's busy. I need to see the doctor. When can I see her? Where are they? When can I see the doctor? I need to see the doctor. Just repeating it over and over again. And usually people will become frustrated. That is totally what you should expect to happen. And hopefully that frustration will lead them to get you what you want because they know you're not going to budge. You've very clearly shown that you're not going to move from this until you see the doctor. And then lastly, sorry, I was Googling around and found an image and I just thought this was so wildly strange and bizarre, I had to put it in. So fogging is the technique where if someone is being aggressive and they have a very kind of aggressive, rude, agitated communication style, the way to counteract that is fogging. So if you go to get coffee with a friend and they say, God, you're always late. You have no respect for me or anybody else. You just think your time is so much more valuable than anyone else. You say, you're right. I am. I'm always late, constantly. I've never been, on time to anything in my life. And I do think that my time is more valuable than the popes, than the presidents, than anybody. And you just kind of agree with everything that they're saying. And by agreeing, it gives them kind of nothing to push back against. And you can do it in a way that's kind of funny to bring some humor into it, because sometimes bringing humor is a really good way to counteract anger, and it immediately brings someone back. Or you could do it in a way that's more subtle and say, you're right, I'm sorry, I have been late recently, and I'm sorry that it feels like my time is more valuable than yours, because you're right, it's not. And so by agreeing with them, there's nothing for them to argue with, because you're already on their side. And then sometimes that'll immediately deflate them. And then they're like, oh, yeah, it's okay, fine. And if there's nothing to argue with, they're going to move on. It's not going to work all the time, but it's a good thing to try, either in being kind of very dramatic and over the top and funny, or just by agreeing with them and not trying to argue. So those are the 5 skills and kind of a communication overview. And I have some questions I'd love to hear. And we can talk about these or other ones, but these are just ones that came to the top of my head. So what helps you communicate well with others, and what makes it harder? We all have things that help us facilitate good communication and block it up and makes it a lot harder for us to have good conversations. What strategies have you tried before that we didn't talk about today? Ones that you really like, that you think work well, that might be helpful to share. And what strategies would you want to try from today's presentation? Or maybe that others have tried that they shared, and you want to kind of get a hand of it, even just doing it as a practice, not a real conversation, but just try it out with a friend. And then how does having SMA or someone with SMA in your life impact your communication style? I think that this is a really important question. And I think it comes up a lot because we have to communicate constantly, right? And I think it is more important for people with disabilities, especially when we have caregivers, when we have doctors, when we have just a lot more things that we need to coordinate and ask for. And so I think having SMA can impact that in some ways. And so thinking about it and being aware of it can help us learn how to maybe manage some feelings we have, or manage other people's expectations or their desires, and help us bolster our own ability to communicate effectively. Okay, yeah, I see that some people have used fogging before. Okay, yes. Yep, it's called fogging. It's great because you're kind of like putting them in a cloud and they get disoriented. Yeah. So what are people's thoughts either on these questions or anything else that I didn't mention? Okay. Okay. Thanks for coming, Serena. Oh, Sierra. Sorry, I said your name wrong. Yeah. Don't worry, I'm trained to sit with silence. It's actually one of the requirements of getting a doctorate in psychology. You're excited about the dear man strategy. Oh, what do you like about it, Jackie? Or what sounds interesting or seems like it might be a good fit for you? And feel free to unmute yourself, anybody, if that's easier than typing.
Hi.
Hey.
I had really liked the Dear Man. Just, I don't know, I always find like the assertion part and like staying true to like what I'm trying to say really hard. So like
Yes.
having it have like the like extra aspects of how to like continue to say what you mean or like want to say over and over again. Really, I feel like that's a lot more helpful than other strategies I've seen before.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's helpful that assert is only one part of it, right? Like, I think in some other communication strategies, like you were saying, it might just be assert your needs, go out there, tell them what you want. But this kind of has other like strategies in place of just describe it very objectively, and then negotiate too and talk about your emotions and what you want that changes. And so it's not just assert, but it does it in a way that feels collaborative, I think, and also kind of genuine too. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Jackie. Were there other people that like the Dear Man or some other skills? Or also, I'm curious too, what communication style do some people think they are? If you feel comfortable sharing. Or what communication style do you think maybe you would want to move away from or move towards? Or any of these other questions that I have. Or what's on your mind? Jella's asking if we can all unmute. I am not the boss around here, so I will defer that to the Cura SMA reps.
Yeah, so Della, if you have a question or I want to start a conversation, absolutely, you can feel free to unmute.
Thank you. It's much easier than typing and typing and typing, whatever. I just feel like I talk differently to different people.
Yes.
Totally. And I really, really need help with all of this and all of these different ones, especially with my husband, because husbands are really hard to talk to.
Yes, note to husbands everywhere. Definitely. And I really like the point of you're going to talk differently to different people and in different situations, maybe even the same person in different situations. And I'm wondering, are there ones where it feels the most difficult for you to have important conversations?
My husband.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
You would think that living with a man for 25 years, you wouldn't have to have so much conversation. He would just get it, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
It's going to become really, really useful because he likes to argue about everything. So, and I'm not the type of person that backs down. So I'm definitely going to use that one.
Yeah, the broken record technique might be good for you too. Yeah, and I think that like sometimes it can, feel a little bit like, hey, we've been living together for eternity. Why don't you get this? But I think there's also the other aspect of we fall into patterns. Like we all have these habits that we get into over and over again, and over years and decades, they get more and more ingrained. And so it can be hard sometimes to address them in a way that feels like we're actually changing course and we're going to switch tracks onto this other way that we've never done before. So I want to give you a little bit of validation about how hard it is, and that it's probably not something you're doing. It's probably just kind of that you're both have the same way you've been doing it for years, and it can be really hard to change that. And especially our communication skills, unless we're actively thinking about how we're talking and communicating, it's real hard to change. Personally, for me too. I have a lot of issues trying to, think very strategically about how I'm going to have this conversation if I know it's going to get emotional with doctors, family, friends, partners, whatever it is. And so I think it's a really good point that even with the people that maybe we have the closest, longest relationship with, it's still hard. Yeah, definitely. And I see Robin, it's hard to schedule time with my husband. Yep, another husband. Sorry, husbands around here. To discuss difficult non-caregiver topics like cleaning up and selling our motorhome. Yep, and we haven't driven in almost a decade. Okay, I see. It quickly gets confrontational because I'm trying to tell him how to spend his non-caregiver time. I gotcha. Thank you for bringing this up, Robin. And maybe I wonder too if this is something that you've experienced. I'm sorry, could you remind me of your name? The person who just spoke, I'm sorry.
Me.
Yes.
Me? Della.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
That's okay, Della.
Della, okay. Della and Robin, and I think that this is something that might come up with, people who have SMA or people who are in caregiver situations around SMA is what do we feel comfortable asking for that maybe is having to do with caregiving or isn't. And I think that sometimes it can be hard to ask for what we need, or it might feel like I don't want to get them angry. I don't want to mess up this. I'm going to always prioritize the relationship. That's going to be my number one priority always. And I'm not always going to think as much about self-respect or getting what I want out of the conversation and having some behavior change. And so I think it can be really difficult. And using one of these techniques can help kind of not prioritize the relationship at all costs. And so maybe doing Dear Man or doing Give, it can help you prioritize something else for a change and see how that goes. And they'll give you the steps, like in the Dear Man, it does it in a way that tries to be as non-confrontational as possible. So you, even in Dear Man, you are kind of acknowledging and appreciating the relationship and what the person's doing for you, but it doesn't entirely prioritize that. So I'm wondering if it seems like maybe Dear Man might work for you, Robin, when you're trying to schedule a time with your husband to talk about non-caregiver topics. You can unmute yourself if you want, or if you prefer to type in the chat, Robin. Maybe while you're talking, I'll kind of address Sarah's. Yep, completely. And Sarah, I want to say, I think that's a gendered experience. I don't think a lot of cis men feel worried about asking for what they want for fear of being seen as aggressive. I think, it's kind of the whole, if a woman walks into a room and asks for what she wants, she's bossy, versus a man, he's got boss qualities in a good way. And so I think, oh yeah, of course, Robin, no worries. So I think kind of thinking, is this coming from a gendered place? And if a man did it, would they be seen as assertive or aggressive? And of course, because we live in a gendered society, you might still come off as, whatever the person interprets you as, but you're actually not. You're asking for what you need in a way that is not actually aggressive. You're not berating someone. You're not being rude. You're not using you statements of you are the problem. You are always doing this. You're saying, this is what I need. This is what I'm asking for. And I think it can be hard, especially as, disabled femme women, to ask for what you need. But I think it takes practice, and that's kind of one of the only ways we're actually going to preserve self-respect and get our needs met and preserve the relationship. So let me go back. I think it's a really helpful slide. So the differences are being inappropriately honest versus being direct. Appropriately honest. Dominating others, nope, you're just advocating for yourself. You're still listening and you're not interrupting versus you're not going to listen at all. You're not going to give them any airtime. When you're aggressive, you can't tolerate anyone kind of criticizing you or asking for their needs. That's not true with assertive. You're still open to negotiation on some things, maybe not all. Maybe some things you do have hard boundaries, but then that's okay. And you're expressing your emotions in terms of I statements in a way that does have a huge difference for making the person feel less judgmental. You're not blaming them. You're saying, this is how I feel. And how I feel is very different from you are doing this and you're a horrible person because you're doing this. But it's hard. I hear you a lot on that. And I think a lot of it is a gendered disabled experience or being on the downside of power to not having experience and practice with asking for what you want. What do people think about that? With worried about coming off as aggressive when you're trying to be assertive. Is that something some other people are worried about as well? You can raise your hand or make an emoji reaction as well, if that's easier. What do people find to be the hardest things to communicate about? So we have husbands, just getting them to do stuff, it sounds like. Are there other things as well?
For me, this is Della again.
Yeah.
It's like certain things, like, so we get up early in the morning, he goes to work, so I'm here all day by myself. So things have to be set up in a way where I can take care of myself for the day.
Yeah.
And if lids are put on too tight on things or things are put out of my reach, it's very frustrating constantly having to remind him, I can't reach that. This is why you can't close the lid of a pill bottle or whatever it is too tight. I can't get into it. It just seems like I'm like the repeating thing over and over and over, but it's not just getting in there.
Yes. Yes. Have other people had this experience? Or do other people have tips for Della? I'm sure a lot of us have had that experience, whether we have SMA or not, of having to tell someone the same thing over and over again. And something that comes to mind for me is communication. Oh, okay. You have a similar experience with your mom, and I'm just trying to stay calm when I repeat myself. Yes. Yes. So one of the skills into your man is mindfulness. staying calm, not letting your emotions kind of drive the conversations. And it's really hard, especially when it comes to our own needs or the needs of people that we care about. Absolutely, it can be hard to stay calm. Okay, someone has an idea, transfer the pills to a different container you can always open. So there are other, yeah, I was about to go there, Robin. Sometimes there are ways of maybe to end and negotiate into your man of, okay, it sounds like, you know, it's hard for all of us to remember the things that we have to do before you go to work every day. And I want to make sure that, you know, I'm not upset at you, you're not upset at me. What are some things that we can do to make it easier? That, you know, maybe you think would work. Here are some ideas I have. Katie says sometimes it's helpful to have visual reminders, almost like a to-do list that can be in their line of sight as a way to remind them. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that too. That could be a way to negotiate of saying, what if we transfer my pills to this container? Or what if we create a to-do list or a checklist? Sometimes people will take to that, sometimes they won't. But it can be something that, you know, it's a negotiation, it's a trial. Yeah, I see you smiling a little bit, Della. Is that? Yeah. Yeah. Having these to-do lists, that can be something that we talk about when we are in the negotiation phase and saying, here are all these solutions that I've come up with. Which do you think would work for you? And if there aren't any on here, or if you have other ideas, what are they? And let's go through them one by one until we find one that works for us and feels good. So Jenny says, I totally agree with Katie. When it comes to parenting kids with SMA, there's a lot of daily to-dos to follow up on, and keeping checklists around the house helps us to not have to always be reminding one another of what needs to be done, because that's good. That gets old. Yes, it does. Oh, that's great. You have a puppy though. Very jealous of your dog. Yeah. Do you think, Della, that checklist might be something? Is that something that you've tried before?
Yeah, I'm really good about putting sticky notes everywhere.
Yes, and I could see how you would be very frustrated if it's like, hey, we've tried this thing, it's not working. We've tried that thing, it's not working. And I think when it comes to that, I would wonder if, you know, there's going to be plenty of times you're going to try all these techniques, they're not going to work. Why? I'm curious if it feels like we can have conversations with people about what's kind of at the root of this. Why does it feel so difficult every day or every morning? What can I do to support you in helping us have an easier time in our day-to-day life? What happens for you in the morning when we're running around? What happens for you at night before we go to sleep when we're thinking about our next day? Trying to like get into their shoes or their wheelchair or their tires or walker or whatever, about what is going on. What is their experience? Are they so frazzled about, you know, oh God, my wife is going to yell at me again if I forget this thing, and then I just get frazzled and I run out the door. Or I'm just so stressed about work all the time that I don't think about it, or it does just slip my mind and then I get embarrassed and I feel guilty and I think about how you're at home and I can't be the kind of husband that I know you deserve. I wonder what's going on for our parents, friends, partners when all that happens. And I don't know. And some people will have those conversations and some won't. And that's really hard when we've tried all these techniques. We're being very open, we're being vulnerable, and it feels like we're getting shut out maybe sometimes. And we can't have those conversations to understand what really is going on underneath, about why this thing is really hard to make a change in. And Camille says, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, this may be a little off topic, but back in college, I had a conversation with a caregiver about how we individuals have OCD, but it's not OCD as much as we need items to be in a specific way position so we can be as independent as much as possible when being alone without an aid for a specific time frame. Totally. I mean, we have to be hyper vigilant, right? If you're a person with an SMA who's trying to live independently, you have to have your ducks in a row. If you're a parent or partner or friend who's helping, someone with SMA, you also have to get your ducks in a row. You have to be very, very organized. And while we see that and maybe prioritize that and value and understand all the things we need to do, not everyone in our life who we depend on will. And that's extremely frustrating, and that makes it hard to have those relationships sometimes. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of putting it, Camille. So we have about 5 minutes left, I believe. Here, I'm gonna go back to the slide with the. Are there other questions, comments, thoughts? What other resources would be helpful for me to share with you? I kind of shared the tip of the iceberg. What else would be helpful? I can include a couple other resources. I'm not sure if we'll be sending out an email after this or not, but I can try to include somewhere, maybe some good websites, YouTube channels, podcasts, books, if you're, for whatever medium you like to access information through, just about good communication.
And yes, we'll be sending an email afterwards so we can include that.
Okay. And for folks who are having issues with husbands, partners, there's actually a phenomenal podcast. It's not, sometimes it's about communication, sometimes it's not, but it's a podcast by Esther Perel called Where Shall We Begin? And she is like a world-class, famous, phenomenal, brilliant couples therapist. And she'll have real couples on to her podcast to talk about issues that they're experiencing, and she'll help them through it. And they just meet for one, and she records it and puts it up. And sometimes if you listen to them, you can catch kind of similar issues you're having in your relationship and maybe use her advice. That's one thing that kind of came off the top of my head. There's also a great book called Difficult Conversations that's extremely reader friendly. I think they might have come out with a couple new ones since I brought it a while ago, but it's a great book. And then if you look up Marsha Linehan, hers are a little bit more technical because they're written for therapists, but they're still very easy to read. And she has a bunch of worksheets too. If you Google her name and then just Google some of her books and put in PDF, it's easy to grab a copy. Mindfulness is very important as well. Mindfulness helps with everything. I can also put my email in the chat. If you have any questions that come up or you want to get in touch, talk about mental health, anything, always feel free to reach out to me.
Well, and we'll make sure to include the Dear Man video in our email.
Yes, definitely. Should I stop sharing my screen? Or
If you go to the next slide, I think, or the final slide.
yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Julia, for your great presentation, facilitating this wonderful discussion. We really appreciate the time you took with us today, and I appreciate everyone who came and interacted. This was obviously such a great conversation, so thank you to everyone. And as I mentioned, you'll all be getting a follow-up email. It will include a survey, a list of Julia's sources or resources, I should say, and we'll also be emailing our one randomly selected wellness prize winner as well. So keep an eye out for that. And as you can see on the slide, we want to invite you to our final wellness webinar this year on Wednesday, November 3rd. We will have a session for mindfulness for self-compassion. And finally, we'd like to thank Genentech for our sponsorship for the Wellness Webinar Series. We could not have this series without their incredible support, so thank you so much. And if there's anything we can do for you, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to communitysupport@curasma.org. Thank you so much and have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Take care.